Hello everybody, and welcome to Massey's webinar about learner personas. I am going to create this into a podcast. So, hello if you're listening on the podcast, and thank you to everyone that's here with me live today. Today, we are talking about a topic that we've spoken about quite a bit lately, and that's learner personas. You guys know that we want to help you create the best learner personas you possibly can. But I want to start with a quick question for you all. I want to know, do you already have learner personas? Nope, not yet. Yeah, but I know they're rubbish. I love the honesty there. All right, well, we've got quite a mixed bag there. We've got nope, not yet, which is 10 people. We've got one that's just said yep, and 6 of you says yes, you have got personas, but you know they're rubbish. So let's see if we can change that today. But before we get stuck in to personas, we need to understand what we're doing with our marketing and communication. And the truth is, marketing is a process of understanding and then influencing someone's behavior. If we don't understand who our target audience is, if we don't know who we're trying to influence, we can't do this. We have to understand our target audience first before any of our marketing will be impactful. And to do that, we create learner personas. So, what is a learner persona? A learner persona is a semi-fictional representation of your target audience. It is based on market research, so that means talking to your target audience. So for most of us on this call, that means talking to your colleagues, fellow employees of your organisation. We get qualitative and quantitative feedback from those people. So sometimes we can use data that already exists, such as our HR data, our LMS data, and things like that. But then we should also talk to people and understand their thoughts and their feelings about what we are doing. This gives us a really in-depth understanding of who they are as human beings and how our learning offering is affecting them. Only once we've done all that research, and I really mean this, only once you've done all of your research, we can add our own assumptions in. So we can make some assumptions and come to our own conclusions about how these people might behave. But it's coming from a point of information, of research, and understanding of our target audience. But why do we create personas? Well, the truth is, having this understanding of our target audience makes everything we do in marketing 10 times better, 100 times better. I truly believe learner personas are the backbone of really phenomenal marketing for learning. Because learner personas allow us to improve targeting. It helps us make the marketing actually effective and resonate and answer that what's in it for me. If any of you listen to the podcast, we mention the what's in it for me every single podcast episode, don't we? Understanding your audience and creating learner personas will help you do just that. It will allow us to personalize the marketing. So what resonates with you might not resonate with me, and vice versa. So it allows us to personalize our marketing so that we can actually get butts moving. And it allows us to have a meaningful conversation with people. All too often in L&D, we're just shoving out information and hoping for the best. But with personas, we can actually send really targeted, really impactful communications to our people. But with so much data in L&D, why on earth do we need personas? We have so many different things we can segment on. Unlike typical marketing, we know who our audience is. We know their job title. We know what they're doing. We know their job role. We know a lot about them. So if we can segment on that and their demographics, their age, and all things like that, why don't we just do that? Why isn't that good enough? And this is an example that you may have seen us talk about before, if you followed maths at any amount of time. King Charles and Ozzy Osbourne. They could not be more different, could they? But demographically, they're almost identical. They're both male. They were both born in 1948. They were raised in the UK. They've both been married twice. They both live in castles. And they're both wealthy and famous. King Charles Ozzy Osbourne. Very different people, aren't they? Their intrinsic motivations in life are probably, I'll go as far to say, is definitely incredibly different. And that's a case in point about why we don't just target on demographics. Because if we do, we'll end up sending both of these people the same message, and it's not really going to resonate that well with either of them. There are, of course, some exceptions to this rule. If I was a cleaning company and I was targeting rich, wealthy men that need their castles cleaned, I would probably segment based on demographics. But in our situation, in learning and development, that's not good enough. We need to dig deeper. And that's why we create learner personas. So learner personas have 4 fundamental parts. That's the demographics, like we just spoke through. We need to understand who our people are at a fundamental level. We need to understand the geographics of them as well. And that's particularly important in L&D if you're in a global company. There are so many different nuances that we need to bear in mind. We then have psychographics, and that's who they are intrinsically. We'll dig more into each of these in just a second. And lastly, we have their behaviors. And that's probably one that, as a learning professional, you care about the most. So let's look at these a bit more. Let's look at psychographics. So that's things like their time available for learning, their values, what's actually important to them, not as a learner, but as a human. What are their pain points? Again, not as a learner, but as a human being. And maybe as an employee in your organization, is there a lot of red tape they need to follow on a daily basis? Is there a lot of hoops they need to jump through? What's causing them a bit of a gripe at work? What's causing them a bit of a gripe outside of work? Oftentimes, if we're talking to our target audience and they've got a young family that take up a lot of their attention, sometimes that's a pain point. We want to know their desires. What do they want out of life? What are they striving towards? What gets them out of bed in the morning? We want to know their attitudes and their social and cultural norms. What is it to be a person in their environment? What is it to be a good person in their environment? What's important to them? There are some countries where they will talk really freely about desire to make more money. And in other countries, that's a complete hush hush, and we'd never say that. What is it for your target audience? Of course, we also want to know their activities, so the typical things they do, their roles, but really we're here looking about emotional drivers. What is it that makes this person jump out of bed in the morning? We also then want to look at their behaviors. And in learning, we are so fortunate that we have so much data on our people. We have so much information that we can gather and we can use to our advantage. So their habits. Often when we look at habits for our personas, we're thinking about their working habits. What are they doing? Are they in the office a lot? Are they commuting? Are they working from home? Are they constantly on the move? Are they a salesperson that's literally in their car, or on a bus, on a plane, on a train? What are they doing? We can see their current activity with learning by looking at data from our learning platform. How frequently do they visit? Do they access it on mobile or desktop? Things like that are super helpful in understanding the behaviors of our target audience. Are they active or passive learners? Are they actually applying the learning afterwards? And what are their preferences if we really are thinking about them as a human being? What do they prefer to do? And this, again, isn't just about learning. Are they happy in their role? Is one of their preferences just to get on with their day job? Or do they love socializing and engaging with their colleagues and their peers? What matters to them? And how does their psychographic data and what's important to them, how does that reflect through their behaviors? We need to remember here that we're looking at these people as human beings, not as learners. So what are their wants, needs, desires, expectations from learning, but also away from learning? Oftentimes we'll say they really want quick and easy ways to learn. They probably don't want ways to learn at all. They just want to be really, really, really good at their job so they get a promotion. And the solution to that is quick and easy ways to learn around their day job. So we need to make sure we're taking off our learning hats a little bit. We're not looking at this for a learning lens. We're looking at this as these people are individuals and human beings. We also need to consider their geographics, the region they live in, the size and population that they are part of. That's a really big thing. And I don't necessarily mean just of the country. We recorded a really fantastic podcast on learner personas with Elvira from Expedia Group. And some of the countries that they operate in are really, really small, and they have tiny, tiny offices. So those people talk a lot more to their colleagues. They know pretty much everyone in their office. Other countries have huge offices and nobody knows each other. And that's a really important nuance to remember when we're creating our personas. You also want to remember the culture that you're dealing with as well. We know cultures are different across the globe. We are now working in a global workforce. How can we make sure that our personas are representative of that entire global workforce? And then we want to add some flavor to our personas. And that's where the demographics come in. That's when we're looking at things like maybe age or gender or job role, their seniority in the organization, how much how big their team is. Are they managing a team or are they part of a wider team? What's their generation? We now have, what is it, 5 generations in the workforce? How do we manage that? What does that persona fall into? All of this does have an impact on who they are as an individual, but we want to make sure that we are not segmenting on this information alone, and that we are making sure we are thinking about who they are as a human being. So how do we build learner personas? What do we do? So I'm sure all of you would have thought about personas before, thought about, yep, they're a great idea, and then sat there and gone, oh, what do I do? How do I do this? This is a weird thing. What do I do? Well, first things first, and it's one that L&D like to avoid, and it's also very, very obvious. You've got to talk to your target audience. There's no two ways about this. You need to get meetings in with the people you are targeting. For learning and development professionals, this is way easier than most marketers out there. We can easily access our target audience, can't we? On the most part. I know some people, if you're marketing your learning externally, you've got the same problem as the rest of marketers in the world. But for those that are marketing their learning internally to employees at their organization, you have their email addresses. You have direct access to talk to them. Use it. Use that information and talk to these people. It feels hard, but it will pay off in the end. So please, 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 when we're talking through the rest of the data and we get into the nitty-gritty of how you get some of this data, remember that you need to go out and talk to your target audience. But what else do we need? So we need to gather qualitative data. That's non-numerical data. So you'll garner a lot of this from interviews or maybe long form answers on a survey. It's when people can tell you their actual thoughts, their feelings, what they're doing. So it's descriptive. They're explaining the why and the how behind their answers. They're not just saying yes or no. They're giving you more flavor. They're giving you more information about what they're doing. It's subjective. It's their personal opinion. It's what they believe is true. And that's what we're trying to find out, isn't it? We're not going to argue with people if they say, no, I don't agree with the fact that this is the world's best learning experience. If they're telling you it's rubbish, accept it. We can challenge it later with our marketing. But when we're doing our persona research, we just need to know their thoughts and opinions. Your qualitative data is gathered through observations, surveys, polls, things like that. But as I said, it's the long form answers on your surveys. And oftentimes, face to face or focus groups are much more impactful here. So we want to be talking to people and gathering this data. I prefer to do face to face, virtually, or in a room with the person. Focus groups to really, really get under the skin. You can ask those probing questions. And why do you feel like that? And you get some really, really good research from that. From that, you then put these into groups. So you put them into people that feel a certain way. Oftentimes, this will not fall into the same buckets as you think it might. So you won't have all of your marketing professionals falling into one bucket, all of your finance professionals into another. You will be finding different themes that unite your target audience aside from demographic information. I'm just going to read this question here from Helen. What if your target audience is pretty much anyone who uses your tool or product, and it could be anyone in the world, such as Microsoft Office users? It's such a broad audience. Absolutely. But that is a marketer's problem. Apple, for example, their target audience is pretty much everyone over the age of, let's be realistic, 13, wants an iPhone of some sort. They have a really, really broad target audience. They will still go out and find segments of their target audience to interview and find that data. Often when it's a really, really, really broad audience like that, like you said, Microsoft Office users, there are data sources externally that you can tap into as well. You can use third-party organizations that help you set up those focus groups. But it is a bit more tricky. It's a challenge that is faced by marketers worldwide. L&D are a bit more fortunate because if you're targeting employees, you know who they are. I hope that answers your question there, Helen. So after qualitative data, we have quantitative data. And I hate saying these words, and I put them in every presentation I do about personas, which is just great for me. This is your numerical data. There's actually a typo on my screen. Please ignore it. It's your numerical data. So it's countable. It's measurable. It's yes or no. There's no in between. You can't kind of be yes or kind of be no. If you put a maybe in there, it's yes, no, or maybe. You can't be both. It tells us how many, how much, or how often. So it's very, very tangible data. It's fixed. It's factual. It's there. So we gather this by sending out surveys or counting things. So a lot of your LMS data, for example, your learning platform data will be quantitative. It will tell you, you have this amount of active users. This person has accessed the program 5 times. It's indisputable. This data is really, really useful when you're looking at behavior. So it's yes or no. It's really simple to understand. And in L&D, we have a lot of quantitative data sources. You have your LMS data, so usage, active users, course completions. That's a real big piece of quantitative data we have in L&D. Whether you have a learning platform or not, you know how many people have been on your training. So if you're doing face-to-face training still only, then you know how many people have gone through it. You know how many people have completed your program. The behavior towards learning, this is something we can ask them very, very easily. How often do you access the LMS? That kind of thing. Whether they're a passive or an active learner, whether it's people that are just completing training when they're told to versus people that are going out and seeking that information. We also have a lot of HR data that we can use. So the demographical data, you are in England or you are not. It's quantitative. It's yes or no, black or white. Your geographic data, and also there's some psychographic data that we can garner too. So are people home-based or office-based? How often do they come into the office and things like that? Then we also have our engagement data. And some of you might feel like this is a bit unattainable at the moment, but down the line, when you start doing more and more marketing, you will start realizing how many impressions you get when you put out a certain piece of marketing or a certain piece of learning. How many opens, how well people interact with stuff, the click-through rates. There are a lot of different quantitative data sources we can use as L&Ders trying to market our learning. But the crux of it all comes down to good data in, good data out. If you cut corners at the research stage of your learner personas, they're going to fall short. If you try to skip past interviewing people because it takes time, you're going to make learner personas based on pretty much your own assumptions, and therefore they will be biased. No matter how hard you try, your own biases will come in. Make sure you don't cut corners. Invest the time up front. It's hard, I know. We do a lot in L&D, don't we? And this is another thing added to your plate. But the great thing with personas is it doesn't just help with your communications. Understanding your audience will help with your instructional design, your learning experience design, and all of that other stuff. So they're a tool that you can use across your L&D function, not just for your communication or your marketing. So please, please, please don't cut corners at this stage. No matter how tempting it can feel, make sure that you are digging in, you're talking to your target audience, you're doing that research, whether it's sending out a survey or doing a focus group. Get some actual feedback from your target audience. But then when we bring this all together, we need to turn this into something that looks and resembles a real person. Because remember, a persona is a semi-fictional representation of your target audience. So I'm going to talk you through a persona I created probably 4 weeks ago. It wasn't very long ago at all, just before I took my summer break. I've anonymized it so that my client's data is no longer in it. But I spent time. I went out, I spoke to people, I did a lot of focus groups. I got a lot of information, and then it turned into this persona. So I'm going to walk you through all the different segments, that's probably the right word, sections on this persona and how I came to these conclusions. So first things first, you don't have to have alliteration in the name, but it makes it easier to remember. So we always alliterate our names for our personas. So we'll have Loyal Lydia, Determined Drew, and today I'm going to talk you through Hesitant Hayley. At the top of my persona, I've got the key stats. So this is the demographic data. And you can see here I've used quite a broad range. So the age 37 to 40, okay, they're in them late 30s, early 40s. She's been at the company for 8 to 12 years. She manages a big team, a team of 10 plus. But she's only become a manager in recent years. So this is all demographic data. It's all quantitative that I found out from HR sources and their LMS. As much as this is at the top of my persona, I wouldn't recommend doing this first. I would leave this right until the end, because you can get so hung up on these demographics that just add flavor to our persona. So it's up the top there, but I recommend leaving that until the end. What I recommend starting with is the personal profile. So I did a lot of research, and I found that there was a group of people in this organization that were new managers and were very, very nervous. They all gave me answers that I could just summarize by saying imposter syndrome. So I wanted to make sure that came across. Once I found those people that gave me those answers, I looked at the other answers they gave me, which then added the character in here. So I've said Hayley is a very successful career woman. She's recently been promoted to a managerial role. And although she's been very successful in her career so far, she's nervous. She's looking for some guidance. She wants a bit of hand-holding in this manager role. Outside of work, she's a family woman and enjoys spending time with her young children, her husband, and her extended family. So she works hard to provide the best possible life for them. So you can see here that we're kind of painting a picture of who Hayley is away from work. We've said she's a new manager because that's a really, really big defining character trait of hers. But we've spoken about her outside of work, who she is as a human, aside from being a learner. We've not actually mentioned learning at all in her personal profile. We then move on to her key traits and what she's inspired by. So we've already said she's outwardly ambitious and driven, but inside she's nervous and doubtful. She suffers with imposter syndrome. She's very self-reflective and sets herself very high standards. So this again came from my research. The inspired by piece is often quite hard to get people to give you an actual answer on this. I suppose if I said to any of you, what are you inspired by? You'd be like, I don't know. It's quite a big, broad question. So based on all of the research I've got, I have put this in here, and this is an assumption. So this is assumptions I have made from an educated place of this person. Is putting myself in this person's shoes and thinking how they would think. So I've said that Hayley would be inspired by popular entrepreneurs such as Elon Musk. Sometimes, we know not everyone's always a fan of him, Steve Jobs and Stephen Bartlett. But she's also inspired by making her family proud, because that family orientation really came out in the research I had. So now we've got quite a clear picture of Hayley and who she is as our persona, and we've still not mentioned learning at all. And that's very deliberate. We want to know who Hayley is as a human being, and her personal profile isn't related to learning. Then we shimmy over to her motivations and her goals. So firstly, she wanted to become the leader she never had and she always wanted early in her career. She wanted to push her team forward, and she wanted to work hard so she could retire early. Oftentimes when I see learner personas, people say their motivation is to pass all of their online learning. It's not. For most people, that isn't a motivation. Their motivation is doing their job really well. We also looked at, they were the goals. When we look at the motivated by, we're saying recognition from leaders and peers. We had a few comments when I was doing the research here about if I've been told to do something, I feel like I'm doing it wrong. It's a criticism of me. So she likes the recognition and saying, yeah, that was a job well done. Bonuses, rewards, and benefits. She needs something tangible to provide for her family right now. And she wants to have fun and do a job that she loves. Again, we're not really mentioning learning. So you might be thinking, okay, Han, well, we've got these motivations and goals. How will that help us promote our learning? Well, if I know that Hayley wants to become the leader that she never had, I can then create messages and craft messages around personal development, growth, your future career, your future self, enabling teams that will resonate with Hayley, because we're going to help her with learning, become that leader that she never had. She wants to work hard to retire early. Well, we all know if we want to climb that corporate ladder or progress our career, even if it's squiggly, we need to learn stuff, and we need to learn new skills to progress. We can create messages that resonate with that in her as well. And then we come down to emotional drivers. So this is when we're kind of tapping into more of the learning side of things. So she wants quick and easy ways to learn around the day job, because she thinks that admitting she needs training is a weakness. So she wants to be able to do it subtly in her own time. So it's a need because of a real big pain point. And that's really important for us to remember when we're marketing to Hayley. She wants really clear signposting on processes that she should be following. There's a lot of complicated policies that they need to follow at this organization, and she's terrified she'll do something wrong. And she wants efficient communication. She wants to be in the know, but she doesn't want it taken up too much of her time. She's so busy, she's juggling so much. She hasn't got time to sit and watch a 10-minute video. She hasn't got time to read a 10-minute article. She wants to just have the quick and snappy information that she needs. As we've already mentioned, and you can see how this marries up to her motivations, Hayley sees direct feedback as a criticism. She'd rather model her managers than being told what to do. She struggles with her new responsibilities and getting the day job, so time's a massive barrier for her. We all say that time's a barrier, but for Hayley, it really is. And she thinks she's going to be discovered as a fraud in her new role. Again, with these emotional drivers, we can see how we can tailor and craft messages that resonate to Hayley. Rather than just saying, here's an e-learning course on leadership, we can say spend 10 minutes today to become the you your younger self would have thanked you for. Something like that. That would tug on her heartstrings and it would get her moving. It would evoke emotions. So by understanding this character in more detail, we can craft messages that will really resonate with her. And then when that all comes together, we have this document that's a semi-fictional representation of our target audience. Your learner personas should be living documents. We recommend updating them or at least sense checking them every 6 months to a year. So go back. Are your assumptions still correct? Have you learned more about your people? If you have, update them. Put that extra information in. If you've realized actually hesitant Hayley is really, really, really time poor because she only works 9 to 5 because of her family, and actually that's a big hindrance, add that in. You can't expect to get every single bullet point on your learner persona right first time. But even if you've got 50% of them right and you're targeting your people based on those personas, you are going to make more impact with your marketing. And that's what we want. Your learner personas are a tool to help your marketing be more effective. If you're going to use them elsewhere in your function, learner personas are a tool to make your learning more effective. They're a tool that we use to understand who our people are, who our target audience is as human beings. And it's only once we understand who they are as human beings that we can actually effectively market at them. If we're just hoping for the best, we're throwing stuff out there and hoping something sticks, it's not impactful marketing that we want to be doing and actually moving the needle. So that is learner personas in a complete nutshell. I'm conscious I've been talking at you for a long time. So I want to know now, has anyone got any questions about learner personas? Julia has said, can you have personas on different levels in the same company? For example, global personas and regional personas. It really depends on your purpose for them. On the whole, you would expect that you can create global personas and use them regionally because your target audience are your target audience. I have worked with organizations. I have a company that's currently going through our masterclass program, and they have very, very different business units. That's the word I'm looking for. They've got very, very distinct business units. So therefore, each business unit has its own personas. If you are doing all the marketing, like you personally, Julia, I would have one set of personas that straddle your entire target audience. Eve has asked, how many personas do you think it's viable to use? Do you refer to them in marketing or more for just our L&D use? Absolutely. I have a strict answer on how many personas. No organization in the world ever, I don't care if you're Coca-Cola and it's your global marketing, should have more than 5 learner personas. That is your absolute limit. I think in L&D, I've realized the sweet spot's around 3 to 4. So in answer to the first part of your question, 3 to 4, I'd say is ideal, but it depends on your audience size and all of that stuff as well. In terms of do I refer to them in marketing, I think you mean externally. So when I'm actually putting communications out there, we would never say you are a hesitant Hayley, but we refer to their fears and their wants and their needs and their pain points so that when they read that message, it resonates with them. Jessica has said we use learner personas primarily for creating learning offerings and learning formats for specific target groups. That is music to my ears. You can absolutely use those personas you've already got. Maybe you want to dig a bit deeper. I have noticed that a lot of learner personas that are created to create learning are obviously quite learning focused and are lacking some of that human side. But if you have that human side in there and you know how to trigger emotions, keep them in mind when you're doing your marketing. So Yuki's also asked, how do you avoid bias when building your personas? And there's 2 questions here, so I'll answer that one first. You have to go into your discovery sessions, so whether they're focus groups, one-to-one groups, surveys, You need to just accept everything that's said to you. Often when I talk to L&D, they go into these focus groups and somebody will say, well, actually, it's impossible to get on the LMS on my phone. And L&D will get defensive. No, there's a mobile app. It's really, really easy. That doesn't matter. At this point, we're just taking the feedback and we're just taking it all in. We just nod and smile and say, great, thank you for your information. We need to make sure we're putting ourselves in their shoes. It's hard, but you need to tap into that intrinsic empathy that I know we've all got as L&Ders. So you need to take the information you've got. When you're adding in your assumptions, make sure you're doing them from a place of research. So like I did with Hesitant Haley, I had a lot of information on this person, their demographic information and the answers they're giving me. So I could hazard a guess at the kind of things that she'd be inspired by. Make sure you're coming from a point of information. You're not just going, yeah, I think this. If it's an I think, you're probably falling into some biases there. And then your second part of your question was, would you recommend partnering with another department, e.g. internal comms? Yes, 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 and 100 times yes. We should be partnering with other departments in the organization. We should be reaching out to marketing, internal comms, HR, other functions to understand who our people are, especially if you're marketing your learning internally to employees at an organization. That means internal comms and HR are also dealing with the same target audience. Don't work in silos. You never know. Internal comms might already have personas that maybe they could start as a benchmark for you, not benchmark, sorry. They could be a starting point for you to start your own personas. Or maybe you can just use their personas because it's the exact same target audience and you think they're spot on. Partner with other departments in the organization. It will save you a lot of time. People will help you as well. Often people are like, oh, I don't want to talk to marketing, they're scary. And then when they finally talk to marketing and say, hey, we want to just market and communicate our learning offering a bit better, marketing are like, well, why aren't you doing this? So marketers bread and butter to promote and advertise stuff. So they'll be more than happy to help. I've never heard of a marketing team not wanting to help L&D promote their content. So absolutely partner with other departments. Thank you all so much for your time today. I've enjoyed this session and I hope you have too. As I already said, I am going to sort out the recording of this and I am going to put it on the Marketing for Learning podcast. So if you want to listen back to anything we went over today, feel free. And if you have any questions, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to talk to L&Ders about any of your challenges. If you're creating learner personas and you get a bit stuck, please refer to our learner persona guide. It will really help you in creating your personas. So if there's no other questions, I will conclude today's session and I hope to see you on our next webinar, guys. Bye.